The path was barely visible, overgrown with moss and tangled roots. My flashlight flickered, casting long, twisted shadows that danced in the mist. I felt a chill run down my spine, and the air grew colder as I walked further. I turned around, certain I heard footsteps behind me, but there was no one there. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding. The further I went, the more disoriented I became. Every direction looked the same, and I realized I was hopelessly lost. Then I saw it, a dim light flickering through the trees. Desperate for a way out, I followed it, but the closer I got, the more it felt like I was being watched. The light led me to an old, decrepit cabin, half sunken into the swamp. I hesitated but decided to investigate, hoping to find someone who could help. The cabin door creaked open, and a foul stench hit me. Inside, the walls were covered in strange symbols and decaying animal bones. A sense of dread washed over me as I realized this place was no refuge. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, and the temperature dropped sharply. I could hear whispering, unintelligible and close, as if it was right next to my ear. Panicking, I tried to force the door open, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening. I felt a cold breath on my neck and spun around, but there was nothing there. Just as I felt like I was about to lose my mind, the door swung open, and I stumbled out into the swamp, the whispers ceasing immediately. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the swamp, gasping for breath. When I looked back, the cabin was gone, replaced by an impenetrable wall of fog. I never went back to Cypress Hollow, and I warn everyone to stay away. Whatever haunts that swamp doesn't want visitors, and it's best to leave it undisturbed. Bayou Black was notorious for its dark waters and dense, twisting underbrush. Local legends spoke of a shapeshifter that lived there, preying on anyone foolish enough to wander alone. I always thought it was just a story to keep kids from straying too far. That was until I experienced it myself. One evening, while fishing near the bayou, I noticed the air growing unusually cold. A heavy fog rolled in, obscuring the water and the surrounding trees. I decided to pack up and head home, but as I turned, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the water. It was a man, or at least it looked like one, dressed in old, tattered clothes. He had an unsettling stillness about him. I called out, asking if he needed help, but he just stood there, staring at me. The longer I looked, the more I felt something was off. His eyes seemed too dark, too empty. I hurriedly gathered my things and started walking away. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I glanced back and saw the figure following me, his gait unnatural, almost jerky. I quickened my pace, but the footsteps matched mine, always keeping the same distance. Panic set in, and I broke into a run. The fog grew thicker, and the path became harder to follow. Suddenly, I tripped over a root and fell hard, my flashlight skidding away. When I looked up, the figure was standing over me, but now his features were shifting, changing. His face twisted into a grotesque mimicry of my own. Scrambling to my feet, I grabbed the flashlight and swung it at the creature. It let out an otherworldly shriek and dissolved into the fog. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck. As I sped away, I could swear I saw those dark, empty eyes watching me from the rearview mirror. I never returned to Bayou Black, and to this day, I can't shake the feeling that something out there still remembers me. Marshy Creek had always been a place of unease for the townsfolk. It was said that at night, ghostly lanterns could be seen floating over the water, leading the unwary deeper into the swamp. I didn't believe in such things until I saw them for myself. One night, I was driving home when my car broke down near Marshy Creek. With no cell service and no houses nearby, I decided to walk to the nearest gas station a few miles away. The night was dark, and the only light came from my flashlight. As I walked along the edge of the creek, I noticed a faint glow in the distance. It looked like a lantern bobbing gently in the air. Curious, I followed it, thinking it might be someone who could help. But as I got closer, the lantern moved away, deeper into the swamp. I hesitated, but my desperation for help pushed me forward. The lantern led me on a winding path through the thick underbrush. I stumbled several times, the ground growing wetter and more unstable. The glow of the lantern was my only guide. Suddenly, the lantern vanished, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled with my flashlight, and when I finally got it working, I realized I was surrounded by water and thick reeds. Panic set in as I tried to find my way back to the road, but the swamp seemed to close in around me. Then, I heard soft voices, like whispers on the wind, and saw multiple lanterns flickering in the distance. They moved in a slow, eerie dance, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I turned and ran, trying to retrace my steps, but the lanterns followed, their light growing brighter and more menacing. After what felt like hours, I finally stumbled back onto the road, exhausted and covered in mud. The lanterns disappeared as suddenly as they had appeared. I flagged down a passing car and got a ride to the gas station. I later learned that others had reported seeing the ghostly lanterns, always leading people into the swamp, but never out. I haven't been back to Marshy Creek since that night, and I warn anyone who'll listen to stay far away. Whatever those lanterns are, they're not friendly, and they certainly don't want to help. Cypress Bend was a small, isolated community nestled deep in the swamp. People there lived simple lives, but they had one strict rule: never go out after dark. They said something lurked in the swamp, something that didn't belong in our world. I was visiting a friend who had recently moved there, unaware of the local superstition. One evening, we lost track of time while fishing and found ourselves caught outside as night fell. My friend, visibly anxious, insisted we head back immediately. As we made our way through the thick, murky paths, we heard rustling in the bushes. At first, we thought it was just an animal, but the sound followed us, growing louder and closer. My friend whispered that it was the lurker, a creature the locals feared. We picked up our pace, but the rustling turned into heavy footsteps. Suddenly, a foul smell, like rotting vegetation, filled the air. I glanced back and caught a glimpse of a tall, shadowy figure moving between the trees, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. My friend grabbed my arm and urged me to run. We sprinted through the swamp, the lurker's footsteps echoing behind us. The path was treacherous, and I nearly lost my balance several times. Just as I thought we might outrun it, my friend tripped and fell, crying out in pain. I helped him up, and we hid behind a large cypress tree, trying to catch our breath. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then we heard it. A low, guttural growl, just inches away. The lurker was close. Too close. Summoning every ounce of courage, we made a break for it, heading straight for the lights of the village. The lurker gave chase, its growls growing louder and more aggressive. We burst through the tree line and into the village square, collapsing in front of a group of startled villagers. The villagers quickly ushered us inside, slamming the doors shut and bolting them. They told us we were lucky to be alive, that the lurker rarely let its prey escape. I left Cypress Bend the next day, vowing never to return. Even now, I can still hear the lurkers growl in my nightmares, and I know that whatever lurks in those swamps is best left undisturbed. Let me know if you need any changes.